Okay, in this video, it's going to fall into two parts. Going to be a bit of an introduction into American Civil War, and then we're also going to then look at Guts and Glory from Warlord Games. We're going to do an unboxing as part of the video as well, and this is going to be start of a new project for me, looking at the American Civil War. So let's get on with the video. Okay, so this is the box. Guts and Glory. It's from Warlord, and it's basically a starter set and contains more than 750 figures. And so we flip the box over. We basically get two sides, Confederate and Union, or you could make them up as one side. I think as we go through the miniatures, there's not much difference. They could be used as one big army or as two separate smaller armies. And you also get some scenery, as well as the rule books and all of the sort of flags and stuff. So let's turn it back over and open it up. So the first thing we get, that's out of there, is the rule book. It's an A5 size of the Black Powder 2nd edition. So it's exactly the same as the hardback version, just a more compact one that you can easily take to a club or to a friend's home without having to have the weight of the hardback version. You then get this, which is a sort of, it gives you some background on the conflict. So it gives you some of the history of the war, as well as some background about the armies, the two armies involved, Unions and Confederates. And then there are the rules, which these are more like these are additional rules for the American Civil War. And then it'll give you some famous units. Then it looks at some information around some of the leading commanders of the period of the conflict from both sides. And then at the back there are a number of scenarios for you to play out. So you know, we've got Battle of Wilson's Creek, Battle of Salem Church, Gettysburg Day 1, and Gettysburg Day 2. So you know, those are the two books. You also take this to one side. You also get that, as I said, the piece of scenery, MDF, and that's what you get is that on there, Sarissa. So you get the fencing, you get the barn, and the farmhouse set. Nice little set. Good starting piece of scenery for you to use, and you know, that's pretty generic of that period, so it'll fit on any battlefield. Then have the quick reference sheet in there, quite a nice thick cardboard. On this you also get these wound markers to use. So the miniatures. So on the infantry sprue, you get the infantry soldiers in marching order. You also get an artillery piece, so you get all the parts for the artillery, and then you get one commander, and that's pretty much the same on every one of those types of sprues. And you get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, So you get 6 of those, which, like I said before, you could either use this to create one large army for either side, or 2 smaller forces. Now, on the cavalry sprues, again you get more infantry. You also get dismounted dragoons or cavalry, and you get a selection of those on the 3 sprues of the cavalry you get. You've also got some sharpshooters to use, and then you have a good amount of mounted cavalry on each sprue. So you're getting 8 mounted cavalry on each sprue. These are all nicely sculpted. I'm actually quite impressed the amount of detail on these miniatures at this scale. You also get what looks like I think they pronounce them Zouaires. The guys in the sort of baggy, sort of French-looking infantry that were quite popular during that period of the American Civil War. Quite a few units that were dressed in what could only be described as French-style uniforms. So you get some of those, and then you get all the bases for it. You get the sheets for the flags, and this is flags for both sides, so you've got a good array of different flags on there. So you've got ones for particular regiments, like things like Iron Brigade, the Zouave regiments. So you've got a couple of those, 3 of those guys for those units. You've got Custer's Brigade if you want to do Custer's infantry cavalry. Sorry, and then you've got like standard sort of Union cavalry Gideons, and then you've got various flags for various regiments, including also US Marine Corps there. And then likewise you've got the similar thing on the Confederate side. You've got a number of different flags for different units. So you've got like state Virginia flag there. You've got main battle flags for the Confederates, and you've got Mississippi state flags. So you've got a number of state flags from different of the states that seceded from the Union, as well as regimental flags. So like the 18th Virginia Regiment, 2nd Virginia Infantry Regiment, the Orphan Brigade flag. And so you've got a good variety of flags on both, for both sides, to give you plenty of options. Now, like I said, I'm really quite impressed with the miniatures. They're basically, I think they've been described as 13.5 mil. Between sort of 10 and 15 mil, but closer. I think they're closer to 15 than they are to 10, but they're somewhere in between. And they're nicely sculpted. I do particularly like this Epic range that Warlord has come out with. I think it's a nice scale for creating mass battles. So I'm quite pleased to see that they're bringing out Ancients in this scale later this year, which they showcased recently at Salute. So for this episode, we're just going to unbox these and have a look at these. In a future episode, I'm going to look at commanders from both sides and unbox the Union and Confederate commanders boxes, expansions you can buy, which are I think they're in resin, rather than plastic. But I'll do a video on those, and I'll do some information around each of the commanders. The American Civil War was fought between 1861 to 1865 and stands as one of the most defining moments in the history of the United States. This epic conflict between the northern states, commonly known as the Union, and the southern states known as the Confederacy was rooted in complex issues such as slavery, economic issues, and disputes over state rights. Lasting 4 tumultuous years, the war left an indelible mark on the nation and its people. Now, some of the primary catalysts for the Civil War was the contentious issue of slavery. While the northern states had largely moved towards industrialization and opposed the expansion of slavery, the southern states heavily relied on it for labor, for their agrarian economy. The conflict between these two opposing economic systems became a flashpoint, and it was also exacerbated by political and social tensions that had been brewing for several years. Now, with the election of Abraham Lincoln as president in 1860, representing the sort of anti-slavery Republican Party, prompted several states to secede from the Union. In February 1861, the seceded states formed what was now called the Confederate States of America, solidifying the division between both the North and the South. Now, the first shots of the Civil War were fired at Fort Sumter in South Carolina in April of 1861, and this marked the beginning of the conflict that would engulf the nation. Both the Union and the Confederacy mobilized their forces, and what initially seemed like be a short-lived skirmish evolved into what was a protracted and devastating conflict. The Civil War witnessed a series of pivotal battles and campaigns that shaped its trajectory. Battlefields such as Gettysburg, Anaheim, and Bull Run became synonymous with the sacrifices made by both sides. Military leaders like Robert E. Lee for the Confederacy and Ulysses F. Grant for the Union emerged as central figures during this conflict. And in 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that all slaves in Confederate-held territory were to be set free. This transformed the war from being a conflict primarily about preserving the Union to one that also sought to end slavery, altering the course and objectives of the Union war effort. By 1865, the Confederacy faced significant defeats on General Robert E. Lee's surrender at Appomattox, I think I've got that right, courthouse marked the effective end of the Civil War. The nation, however, faced the immense challenge of Reconstruction, and the post-war period saw quite large efforts to rebuild the South, redefine the nation's identity, and grapple with some of the issues that came out of this civil rights and equality. The American Civil War left an enduring legacy that shaped the course of US history. It resulted in the abolition of slavery, the redefinition of federal and state relations, and the establishment of the United States as a more centralized nation. Now, the scars of the war, both physical and psychological, lingered for generations and influenced the nation's path towards healing and progress. The American Civil War was a watershed moment that tested the endurance and ideals of the United States. Beyond the battlefield, it fundamentally altered the nation's trajectory, setting the stage for a more unified but still very deeply divided America. The lessons learned from this tumultuous period continue to resonate, reminding us of ongoing pursuit of a more perfect union. Civil war is always is never a good conflict, no matter what the country and wherever, because it's the people fighting amongst themselves. Whole families can end up being divided, and we saw that during the US Civil War, and we saw that during Civil War in England back in the 17th century. That families could be divided down the two different sides, and brothers fighting against each other, even fathers, sons fighting against each other on a conflict. So it was quite a significant and devastating conflict for America, who really wasn't that very old at the time. As America as a nation was still quite young when the Civil War broke out. And so it's an interesting conflict to look at, because it was also in a period where militarily it was starting to move towards what we would call modern warfare. It was probably one of the last conflicts in where two armies lined up against in front of each other and fired essentially muskets or rifles. It was still fought along the lines of what the Napoleonic Wars were fought along, but the difference was technology had increased dramatically. For instance, there was pistols, handguns. The ability to fire 6 rounds. There were percussion cap rifles. They were easier and faster to load, and yet they fought two lines of infantry in front of each other at a certain distance, firing at each other. The only thing different was that between that and the Napoleonics was that the weapons, or the rifles, pistols, have become more advanced. So it was probably one of the last major conflicts that were fought in a similar style to the Napoleonic period, which makes it quite an interesting conflict to look at, and it's a significant conflict within the history of America. And like I said, America as a nation, the idea of America as a nation wasn't very old, and it was already, this was the defining moment in American history. If it had gone the other way and the Confederacy had won, we probably would have seen America split. We wouldn't see it as it is today. It would have taken a completely different path along a different history line. So it is quite an interesting period, one to look at. I honestly don't know a huge amount about it beyond sort of the major conflicts and the reasons behind the fact that Civil War was, a lot of the reasons behind the Civil War was slavery. So for me, it's going to be quite interesting to do some research and as well as build and paint armies for it. What I plan to do is use the epic scale from Warlord, and we've done an unbox. Well, as part of this video, we've done an unboxing of Guts and Glory, and in future videos, we're going to start looking at some of things like the commanders and do unboxings of the Union and Confederate commanders that you can purchase from Warlord as part of the Epic range. And then we'll look at scenery, we'll look at some of the battles and stuff like that. And it'll be interesting because I'm coming at this as a period of history that I don't know a lot about, apart from the fact that it happened, some of the reasons around it, and I know about some of the battles from watching some documentaries of some films. Other than that, I'm pretty coming into it blind, because it's not a period of history that we covered at school, because it was American history. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to look at. Oh yeah, that's all for this week. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.